let's start with the breaking news. Last night, we've learned that Iran and the United States, both sides, have signed the 14-point MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. And finally, we get the text, we get the document, because both sides, release that document. So when it comes to what has happened so far, I think looking at the 14-point plan, you may see many people would argue that it was a huge defeat for the Trump administration, for the United States. But in my opinion, this is the reality of the new world we're living in. You cannot have slaves anymore, because all these things that are happening in this memorandum of understanding, by the way, it's not a deal, it's not any sort of agreement, it's a path, it's some sort of a starting point for the two sides to
Yes.
come together and to talk. This is the main point. But the whole foundation of what's going on is what was, I think, the whole foundation of the slavery, how the slaves came out and said, we are not slaves anymore. We want to have our rights. This is what's going on to my understanding. But going to what's going on with the 14-point plan, the main point, the first point is talking about Israel and Lebanon. Not only Israel and Lebanon, but Iran and the United States. Looking at what has happened, what is your understanding? What do you make of the current situation between the two sides?
I will agree with you, Nima, that this is the reflection of reality. Simply, there was no military victory, which is what made this whole war so hard to understand. Why on earth did Donald Trump go ahead to attack Iran together with the Israelis? You and I spoke up until maybe a week or two before the war, when it became obvious. I was saying there's no way, nobody's that dumb, but I was wrong, and they went ahead with it. And the reason why I thought that they would never do it, because it's very obvious that Iran has escalatory dominance in the region, that they have been preparing for this conflict for 20 years, that they have all kinds of ways to hurt American interests in the region, that they could very likely even be able to evict the United States military presence from the region. So it was all downside. It was all downside risk with upside only for Israel. Israel would be, if the war were successful, the main beneficiary would be Israel, and then City of London and Wall Street. And the United States doesn't really gain anything from this, other than having to police the region still, which is, a heavy undertaking. I was wrong. So this went on for 3 months. I think that the United States and Israel tried everything to avoid this kind of a ceasefire and MOU, the whole framework, because as I see it, it is a massive capitulation for the US and Israel. Because let's remember, 3 months ago, Trump was saying unconditional surrender. He was demanding unconditional surrender. He was going to nominate the new spiritual leader and the new government for Iran. They were going to take control of the Strait of Hormuz. They were going to take control of Iranian oil resources. They were going to deprive Iran of its ballistics program, their main defensive deterrent. This one, they're lifting the naval blockade. They are allowing Iran to export oil again. They are unfreezing $24 billion of Iranian money, and they have agreed to a framework for reparations, which is not going to be cash turned over from the United States to Iran, but they have agreed to a $300 billion fund for reparations and for reconstruction of Iran. This would be the first thing that the United States normally wouldn't allow. They would basically freeze that, sanction it, not allow anybody to invest a cent in Iran. Now they had to climb down from that position. Trump himself, in his first term, imposed maximum pressure sanctions on Iran. So all of this has been thrown overboard. And so it's hard not to see this as a defeat for the United States and Israel, and a victory for Iran. Now, that in itself makes the whole thing a little bit suspicious as well, because who knows? Maybe they're going to use the 60-day window, the 60-day ceasefire, to prepare for the next attack on Iran. But I think that Iranians themselves are not naive. They understand this, and so they will be preparing. But what I found interesting is that Trump was kind of asked how, why this radical change of position, and he said that they were 4 weeks away from running out of oil reserves. So if that's true, and I don't know if that's true because Trump said it, it may or may not be true. That will be a massive, there will be a massively important factor. But then there was also a statement that came from Israel, so carried by Al-Mayadeen, the former commander of Israeli Navy, said that, I'll quote the statements, I'll read it from the Al-Mayadeen English. Quote, "We have seen what even limited Iranian missile strike barrages can do. The damage here in Israel is enormous, enormous. A significant portion of this damage is not visible to us, and we are not aware of it due to military censorship." So Iran has been very, very effective in striking US military bases and targets in Israel. And I think that this has taken the Americans and the Israelis by surprise, because these strikes were extremely accurate and extremely destructive. And so carrying on a military confrontation with Iran was obviously hurting the US and Israelis much more than they were able to hurt the Iranians. So what do? The more you carry it on, the more you get beat up and weakened, and the more your negotiating position deteriorates. So I think that this is part of that reality that you said. I think that they found out the hard way about Iran's military dominance and their military power and their escalatory dominance.